Thank you for joining me on another 10-Minute Thursday Yearbook Edition. For today's video, we'll be covering interview tips and tricks. And for today's video, I actually have a special guest, Monica Loera. She's my right-hand person. We pretty much work together down here in Southern California. So let's just get started. Monica, thank you for joining us today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Carlos. Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I know a lot of our schools are asking about the subject, and hopefully we can give them a few tips and tricks in the next 10 minutes that can help them through this process. So let's get started.
Yeah. So one thing, Monica, I know a lot of my schools, and I've been talking to them about, is why are interviews even important during COVID? Do you have some feedback on that?
Yeah, because people matter. I think that for me, I want to know as much as possible about as many people as I can, just because I think that we're just such interesting subjects. And I think that we're in such an amazing, crazy year that everybody's story is unique. And more so than ever, we have an opportunity to cover a lot more people because we have time to sit down and figure out what we really want to put in these pages and try to be as inclusive as possible, from the freshmen to the sophomore, junior, seniors, the admin, the janitors, the lunch ladies. There's so many different things that happened this year, and each person has a different perspective. And I want to record that because these interviews are the only thing that's going to be left for the year. And 100 years from now, when people are going back to read what you did and find inspiration, just those stories are going to be told. And imagine all the different stories that won't be touched because somebody maybe didn't interview them and take that opportunity. So that being said, I know that there's a lot of tips, but since we only have 10 minutes, what are some tips that you have, Carlos?
Well, one of my main ones right off the bat is to do some research. Just kind of like you were talking about, there's lunch ladies that aren't working or they're working somewhere else. Doing that research, finding out what's going on with your school, but also what's going on with that specific person. For instance, if you're interviewing an athlete, let's say, like Monica, she used to play golf. I know that, but I know nothing about golf. I know four, putt, drive. That's it. That's not going to give me enough information to really have a great conversation with her, to really get that information. But that goes for the same thing with her to me. I used to be a water polo player and swimmer. She doesn't know what set means, what 2-4 means, what pick means. Like, if she understood that.
Like a picture?
No, not like a picture. But if she knew those terminology while we're talking, I would feel so much more comfortable. And that's one thing you always want to make sure, is that your subject that you're interviewing is very comfortable, which leads to my next point, which is location. Choosing a location where you guys can both sit down, relax. Because when you guys are sitting, you guys pull your shoulders back, you kind of lean back, you kind of just get comfortable with the location. And so even during this virtual situation, you want to make sure that's going on. Not only that, because you want to choose a location that doesn't have a lot of noise. There's not a lot of people running around. We're working from home. We may have siblings. We may have family members, pets. And so you want to make sure it's a quiet location because you're going to want to transcribe this. And so one of the key things with transcribing is possibly using audio devices to record. Like right now, I am using an audio device, also using a mic. And it might get a little loud right here while I pull this up, but here's my little mic set. Just that way I can capture the audio, capture what we're talking about. But I am a photographer, so I have access to all this stuff. But I understand schools may not. You guys may not have the funding. So Monica, you've been in the industry for, seems like 13, 14 years now. You've probably seen a lot. You've probably recommended a lot to your schools. What are some of those applications you recommend to your schools to use?
Well, every year there's some new apps that come out there and they're really fun to use. But I think my top for the year is an app called Ferrite. And that's spelled Ferrite. We'll put the description below. But it really is a great audio quality, especially if maybe some of you might be interested in later putting that on a website, or maybe using it for a podcast type of situation. It records really good if you don't have a fancy microphone like Carlos does. Because I'm not a professional photographer, I don't have any of that fancy equipment, and I'm probably not gonna go and buy that. Yeah, look at behind me, behind Carlos, there's a ton of stuff. I don't have that stuff in my house. I have computers and books in my house because that's what I like. But also the voice memo, most phones have that, smartphones. I'm an Apple person, so my smartphone has that, and it's quick and easy, and it records right away. If I'm ever in a jam, and I know that's the very first thing that appears on my phone, it's easy to find. I love using voice memo. And then my other favorite right now is the Otter app, Otter, I believe. And it basically transcribes the conversation that we're having right now. Like if I have that downloaded, and that way, even though I'm writing things down, I also have that app as a backup, which I just absolutely love. Is there anything else, Carlos, that you think that would be, that maybe that I missed and maybe you recommend?
Well, you were talking about writing stuff down. So do you still feel that is very important to do, even though we are utilizing these mic systems, these transcribing, these recorders on our phone? Do you still feel we should write things down?
Yeah, I think it's super important. I know that a lot of you might think that this is really old school and we don't want to kill the trees, and I get that. I have my iPad for that reason too. I wanted to conserve as many trees as I possibly can. But it just, you need to be organized when it comes to your notes. If you're like me, you have tons and tons of notepads full of notes, but it's disorganized and then you don't know where to even get started. Or sometimes those sheets get lost and then you missed on some important information. But I think it's important to be able to not just, like right now I have my iPad, I'm taking notes based on the conversation I'm having with Carlos, so I can go back and maybe improve on something like this later. But I also have a sheet of paper because iPads die, like, without even knowing. Sometimes it freezes and I wouldn't want to say, hey, hold on, Carlos, I need to run to my office or go run somewhere else to get that charger. I can just continue with a piece of paper and then transcribe that back and take a picture from my phone and have that digitally as well. I think it's super important to remember that these apps are fantastic, but I use them as a backup plan, not my first plan.
No, that's a very good point to bring up. And just funny thing, you mentioned you don't want to tell someone, wait, slow down and run away. That is totally true. You don't want to run away, but there will be times you may want to slow down the conversation. You may want to tell them, oh, wait a sec, because maybe they said something that is amazing. And so you're going to say, wait, let me write that down real quick. I want to come back to that. Because if you don't do that, you will probably forget in 2 seconds what they said before. So
I forgot
sometimes
what you said at the beginning. I don't even know what you said anymore. It's out. But I could go back in my notes and I know what you talked about.
Yep. And then the other thing with slowing down is also when you are using these recording devices, some of them can't transcribe as fast as we talk. I know sometimes when I speak Spanish, all of a sudden I start talking fast. And I see this even when I'm with my family members. We're all surrounded speaking Spanish. It goes crazy. Like can't understand each other. It just goes insane. And if you're trying to transcribe that, it's going to be insane, especially even using audio apps. So take that breather, slow it down, and just relax a little. Also, one other thing I know a lot is we tell our schools to come out with a few questions. Do you feel they should have like 5 questions, or should they have the entire conversation scripted when they go into these interviews?
I think when we tell our students to have questions preset and done, it's because a lot of people are usually not prepared to do interviews, or maybe you're nervous about doing an interview because you don't know the subject or you don't know the person, or both. And so that's really used as a backup plan. If I was going to interview you for your sport that I know nothing about and I'm not even interested in, I still want to be able to relay and ask the questions that I think are going to be important for you and also for the audience. And I think that you shouldn't just rely on that. That's almost like your backup plan in case you forget, you're stumbling and I can go back, oh, right. What about this, Carlos? What about, I don't know, whatever it is that I'm asking you with your sport, but you have it as a backup plan only, and let the conversation flow. Have fun with your subject. Sometimes those questions, you might not even touch half of those questions because you're having such a good conversation with that person that they start talking about a ton of other stuff. If Carlos were to ask me about, maybe he's saying that he asked me how far I can drive a ball in golf, I get really excited and say, well, I just bought some new clubs, and what kind of clubs did you get? Oh, well, I got fitted, and da 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 da. It keeps going because now you've engaged your subject. So have fun with it too. Use those questions as a backup, and also just to make sure that you have something to fall back on in case you get nervous.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with that, because when you write down all your questions, it becomes more of a script, but also you're losing that opportunity to find a new story. Because when you write down all your questions, you have a direction that you want to go, and you're kind of forcing it on your interviewee to obey what you want to do. And also, you're also trying to predict what they're going to say. And the reality is you may ask one question and get a completely different answer than what you expected. So yes, no, I completely agree with not scripting it.
Right.
And, well, one thing, Monica, I think we're almost out of time. I think we've come
Oh,
up to our 10 minutes. I wish we can talk more. I know both of us can go on for days talking on this subject or really any subject together. But if you guys have an idea for a future video, please put in the comments below. And if you have any other stuff you want to go over, feel free to let us know. But also in the description, we will be putting all the links from the things we've discussed today. So thank you all for joining us, and happy Thursday.